keeping up with the Jewish culture, the Yiddish culture actually. Jewish is embraced as a lot of places, but the Yiddish culture, it seems that kind of people were not are not familiar with it. The language is diminished due to the demise of the of 6 million, and three of them used Yiddish exclusively as a daily language, and that has disappeared out of our lives. So there's a great danger of the language disappearing, but this is why I am so very thankful that you're trying to revitalize it, which is important. After all, who are we and what are we? Well, remember that I was a child of 10 when all this tragedy started. I come, I was born in the city of Warsaw. I come from a quite well-off family, my folks were business people, and life was good. I used to go to a private school. The school I went to was not a cheder per se. It was just a school that will teach me the Hebrew language in preparation of eventually going to Palestine, because one of my paternal grandparents and uh, they went with three of their children and they lived in Tel Aviv. So they were preparing me when I grow up, eventually to be ready to know the language. But the school was private. Now, the language in our home was strictly Polish. Only when my parents had a secret, then they spoke Yiddish to each other, and we children are not supposed to understand it, but children are sponges. No matter what it is, it stays there with you. And the fact of the matter is, when I came in to the first concentration camp and also to the ghetto, that Yiddish became prevalent because, especially in the ghetto, when they were cleansing the small shtetls from around the city of Warsaw, and there was also an influx of German Jewish refugees coming into the Warsaw ghetto, and the first language stopped being Polish, and it started to be Yiddish. That was the communication. And then the sponges that absorbed these years ago, this started to come out. And suddenly I find myself fluent in it. And look, to me, it's like Esperanto. You know what that is? It's a Jewish Esperanto to us. That we can communicate throughout the globe with it. Let me start first, not with the camp, but the Warsaw Ghetto. That in itself, now I was there from its inception, which was in 1940 in the fall, until the very end, which was in 1943 during the Jewish heroic uprising. And I was practically, my mother and sister, we were practically almost the last people, last inhabitants of that ghetto, because originally it was 450,000 people were stuck in there. When I was taken out, there was like maybe 55,000 of us left. And the rest, when, of course, the Warsaw Ghetto, they started at Treblinka. That was the place of demise. Uh, Helmno, of course, and all the extermination camps. But us already, now, the reason we were there so long, because my mother worked in a place that was very essential to the German Air Force. They were making Air Force uh, airplane parts, and they kept them to the last minute. So I think at the beginning of May of 1943, which was already like almost 3 weeks into the uprising, that's when they liquidated her place and sent us in on a journey to destination unknown. We already knew about Treblinka. We knew about the extermination camps, but nothing could be done. And we went on a wild journey. They stuffed 120 of us into one of those freight cars, giving us two buckets for the journey. A 5 gallon bucket filled with water for 120 people, and one empty one to relieve yourself. Prior to our boarding, they would sprinkle chlorine powder in order to prevent uh, future diseases because they were afraid that uh, typhus would spread. And this gives you a very choking sensation that forces you to drink. And look, what do you have? 5 gallons for 120 people. So I am not going to tell you what we had to resort to. I followed the lead of some others. We had to drink our own urine. And unfortunately, anybody who sweated, somebody reached over to wipe the sweat and moisten their lips. Let me tell you that normally I was on a march of the living not long after, and I wanted to find out how far it was from the city of Warsaw to the destination where we arrived, not knowing where we were. By bus, it was 4.5 hours. But they kept us there for a few days and nights because there were transports ahead of us that were not finished off yet. And when did we wind up being on? We were in the camp of Majdanek, completely unknown to us. We've heard of it, rumors in the ghetto, but we did not know what and where we were. So Majdanek did not have a direct line, rail line into the camp. So they left you out in the city of Lublin, and we had to walk like 2 or 3 kilometers until we come to an enclosure fenced in with signs that the place is mine. We see watchtowers, we see patrols, Germans with dogs, and we still don't know where we were. And they put you up in an open field there for overnight, and then in the morning, all hell is starting to break loose. They had a selection, what I would call a visible selection. In other words, people who had gray hair, big glasses, ladies in stages of pregnancy, people who did not walk straight, older people. They eliminated them, immediately put them into lorries, never to be seen again. And this is prior to our knowing where, what, or why. Now, then comes a big tragedy in my life, and this is the separation of men and women. And I got there with my mom and only sister I had, who was 18 months younger than I. Suddenly I'm separated, never to see them again. Now, they say rumors went that the longevity in that camp was like 6 weeks. I don't know where they got the statistics from. And eventually, what happens, the next step is a real selection. So we had to go by a German officer at the head of the group, and he, with the motion of his thumb, directed you to the left or the right, life or death. Now, I probably was tall for my age. By then, I was like 13 years old, and I was with the living. And then uh, they bring you into camp, another tragedy. Showers after that. Now, the water is not hot or cold, it is cold stuff. And the fright of it is that you don't know what is going to come out through these showers. Is it going to be water to cleanse you or gas to do away with you? and Majdanek was an extermination camp, one of the six. You know, there were thousands, literally, of concentration camps created by the Nazis, but there were only six extermination camps for a specific reason to murder Jewish people, to exterminate. First, explain to you, first of all, the life in there was just simply, you cannot imagine in words as to what cruelty people are capable of. And these were the couples, and the overseers in the camp that you were lucky to go through without being exterminated. You were lucky to stay alive by being beaten and maltreated. It was just a place of horror. It was hell on earth. That's what it was. Now, uh, they, I came in and I innocently asked one of the old timers that was there maybe 2, 3 weeks before me, "Do you know where my mother and sister are?" He very nonchalantly shows me, points to a chimney spewing ashes and belching flames throughout the camps, telling me, "This is where your mother and sister is." And can you imagine a 13-year-old grasping all that? I was not aware. I was a child. I was a baby. The camp of Majdanek, you know, you cannot imagine how bad it was. Sometimes when I go out speaking, lecturing, I am afraid sometimes to cite scenes that the young students will live with the disbelief that this is possible, that one human being can impose upon another. It is just catastrophic. Catastrophic. Now, your question was how many camps I was in. I was lucky enough to go on a transport out of Majdanek. We went to a company. We were actually sold by the SS to this armament company, and I believe there were like 3,000 of us out of Majdanek were sold to the place called Hasag. That was an armament factory, third largest in the Third Reich. And I went on this transport, not knowing where I was going, and that most likely, I believe the necessity of this place saved my life. Why? Because as the Germans were having setbacks on their fronts already, they inducted every able-bodied German into the armed forces, thereby creating a shortage of labor of their economy. So they were forced to delve into concentration camps to keep their economy going. So we were manufacturing ammunition, uniforms, boots, anything that kept them going. And this is where I was in a camp called Skarzisko, also a hellish place. But the discipline was not like Majdanek. People were dying there. I read about it. Uh, there is a book written. It's called "Death Comes in Yellow," and it describes the life on the in this camp in Skarzisko. There were three different divisions, you know, and describes it, and 25,000 people supposedly were shot or killed with malnutrition, other typhus, and any other way. Now, from there, you're asking what my progression is in camp. As the Russians were already starting to invade in Poland, we were evacuated from that camp and they came into the depth of to the center of Germany into a camp called Buchenwald. Must have heard of that. And we were quarantined there for a couple of weeks, not wanting to bring typhus into the heart of Germany. From there, we went to a branch of this Hassag company and to a place called Schlieben, and we were strictly busy with manufacturing bazookas, Panzerfaust. And it was not a tremendously big camp, but with enough discipline of people dying, primarily starvation, malnutrition, and just sickness, disease, whatever reason, people lost their lives. And we lasted there in that camp of Schlieben until very close to the end of the war, which was already in April of 1945. They evacuated this camp already towards the end of April because the Allies were approaching and they didn't know what to do with us. They took us on a death march. And what the death march is specifically what it says. You couldn't keep up with it, they summarily put you aside and done away with you. And we marched, digging some anti-tank ditches, for them. They were hoping that when a Russian tank comes in, falls in there, never comes. It never happened. We were just simply starving and walking until I would remember it. It was May the 8th of 1945, and suddenly they put us up on the 7th of May into a school. Suddenly we get up in the morning, we see a tank standing right in front of that school. I said, okay, this probably must be the end of us. They most likely want to do away with us to erase the atrocities, etc. But no, the turret opens up and out comes a Russian officer. And this was the day of my liberation. So it is May 8th of 1945. What was my first act? I'm not ashamed to say that. I went to a church and I say my prayers to God, but I was praying to my God there for permitting me to survive. And suddenly you are a bird of freedom. What do you do? Now, my first act was that I went to Prague. And I want you to know that the Czech people, the partisans, were very kind to us. I didn't have to worry about tickets on a train. I wore my jacket that was carte blanche, wherever I want to go. And then I come into Prague. I remember the place. It was a hotel called Bubenec in that section. And I'm looking for family, for anybody. We had a tremendous family in Warsaw. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, second cousins, a lot of them I didn't know. But bottom line is that I have a list. I sat with my aunt who lived in Israel. She survived, and she filled me in, and we came up with 126 names within my family who were murdered and cruel. I had normally we have three stages in life: you're a child, adulthood, old age. Okay, but I only had two: childhood and adulthood. The middle years disappeared, we never had it. Because these were formative years in my life, never had the pleasure of living them. So it was a mental transition. My first act out of Prague, I went back to the place of liberation. It's a small, very small town. I stayed there, and this is, as it were today, the border between Czechoslovakia and Germany. And then I went into the Russian zone, and I am multilingual, and I was able to find a job with the Russians as an interpreter from Russian to German. And my father, in all his wisdom, figured out why should we refugees? Let's go back to our lives. not knowing because everybody said the Germans were more or less civil, and everybody remembered the German of the First World War. So we went back. Poland, my friend, was divided. The eastern part was given to the Soviet Union, the western part to Germany. We went to smuggle, unfortunately, to be caught by the Russian guards, who were put in there for 3 or 4 days. Then they took my father away from us. I was not to see the man in 22 years, my father. With all this, I like, I love life because we were created for it. And how does one cope with it? I know that my biggest revenge now at this moment is that I managed to stay normal and I managed to bring up a nice family. It's not done with a gun. Get rid of the word hate. And this is probably the common denominator of hatred and all the tragedy that befell this planet. You get rid of hatred and you're going to lead a normal life. This is what we have to, there are so many anti Semitic acts. What could I have possibly done as a 10-year-old to deserve a death sentence? Criminally, sincerely, no. Otherwise, I was a child, like any other child, loved by my parents, loved by everybody. Privileged, yes, they had a good life, but I did not deserve to be sentenced to death. 6 million, you know what that some it's a country. It's a country. Suddenly they take Florida, everybody in Florida, and they just kill them dead. And then they have 5 Floridas to cope with. I am often asked by students, do I still remember that? Now, remember, I was taken out of camp, but the camp was not taken out of me. So I still have recurrences. My wife tells me that I used to get up at night. The reel still runs in the head. You don't just get rid of it like overnight. But I have managed to reach a stage in life now that I am able to possibly give out of myself what I would like the younger generation to be. And I all constantly leave them with a thought: be kind to you parents, respect your fellow man, and most of all, I said, get rid of hatred. This is my entire message. I am 93 years old. I don't know how much longer the Rabbeinu Shalom is going to permit me stay on this earth. But as long as my eyes are open, and most of all, as long as my body is going, but my mind, thank God, is still with me. So I am trying to share as much as I can.